Hi there, guys. Me again, talking about some another roundup of some of the leaks or releases we've had so far about Warhammer Ninth Edition, or Warhammer 40k Ninth Edition, sorry. And again, I'm going to be talking about them with a bit of an eye on what it means for us as Tyranid players. But if you're not a Tyranid player, there's still plenty on here that you might find interesting, so do stick around. So I'm kind of going to go from the least relevant to the most relevant, sort of saving the best till last. So they have talked about the new table sizes. There's new minimum table sizes for each game. There's not a lot to discuss here. There's no great conspiracy. Effectively, they have taken the kill team boards and made the minimum table sizes out of multiples of the size of that board. The idea being, if you're starting out a new army, you can buy new kill team boards as your army's getting larger, and it makes it a more affordable choice than going out and buying, say, a massive 6x4 table and trying to find somewhere for it. But also, if you have a 6x4 table, you can continue to use that, so it's fine. What I think it generally means is where there's a slightly shorter table, in some cases you're not going to have as deep a deployment zone, which I think is good for us because I hate nothing more than somebody who hides something like right at the back of their deployment zone and surrounds it by bubbles so you just can't get anywhere near it for the whole game pretty much. So anything that means we don't have to traverse as much ground is a good thing. There was some mention about secondary objectives. So what they've done this time that I think is really good is missions are based on your game size. So there are missions tailored to larger games of 2,000 points and ones tailored to like 500 points or 1,000 points. I think this is really good because I don't think all of the missions scaled all that well previously, and you kind of really couldn't tell which ones were ideally meant for which kind of game size. So I think this is a good thing. And secondary objectives, my understanding is that you get to pick from like a list of secondary objectives as to what you want to try and achieve. I don't know if this is going to entirely take over from Maelstrom of War, or if it's going to be alongside it, but I imagine this is the sort of thing where when your codex comes out, you might have specialty second objectives that you can put into any game. The big thing, the sort of the newest thing, is this notion that you can use infantry, so usually it would be a troop's choice, but you can use infantry to perform rituals like raising a banner or planting a beacon or something like that, which can, in some cases, be used to get you victory points. And what they're kind of saying is this is the reason that sometimes you're going to want to take a cheap troops choice. It's not going to be a tax. It's not going to be something that sits there uselessly or sits there as a screen, and you've got no other reason to take it than that you needed to fill out your battalion or brigade. But instead, it's there to serve a purpose, which is, well, I don't really care if they shoot or attack. I want them to do this action. So if they do the action of raising the banner or whatever else it is, they can't shoot or use melee this turn. I'd like to make a prediction now that I'm sure we'll see come true as new codexes come out, that at least somebody will get a troop or an elite that can both do these actions and shoot, but maybe with a penalty. If that doesn't even come out initially. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But again, this is something that I'm quite excited about. I think this benefits us a lot because we are amongst the army with the armies with the cheapest troops choices. Termagants only being 4 points a model, and Rippers being 33 points for 3 bases. So it kind of gives us something else for those kind of cheaper troop options to do. Because quite often, if I take unupgraded Termagants at 4 points a model, like, they don't really serve much of a purpose. I don't often feel like I need screens. I feel like sometimes they hold objectives, but more often than not they get shot off of them, and they're just kind of cannon fodder. So if they could be doing something slightly more useful in my army, I think I'd be really happy about that. Bear in mind, I'm talking about points values from 8th. Our points values could change, but I'm kind of hoping that Termagants don't go shooting up to 5 or 6 points a model, because that would be pretty horrible. Okay, so that's secondary objectives. We don't know too much about those yet. We've seen like clips, snippets of what they are. And again, some of them look like the sort of things you'd get in Maelstrom, like kill this amount of characters, get this amount of points at the end of the game. Personally, I don't see myself using that one much because whenever I play, I can never kill characters. They're always hidden, like wrapped too deep in bubbles, and by the time I get to them, I'm usually too weak to do anything. So, let's talk about command points. So, command points, as I said before, are now based on your game size. So, if you're playing like a 2,000 point, which is, I guess, the sort of standard game size for most people, you're going to have 12 command points each. And you also generate one per turn, assuming you've got a Battleforged army. And I think pretty much everyone would be taking Battleforged army. I don't see many people not. Um, so I think this is pretty cool. Getting 12 command points previously was relatively tough. You would be taking, I guess, maybe 2 battalions to make that happen, or 1 brigade, in which case you'd have, I think, 15. But it's a good amount of points, and we don't have to do a bunch of shenanigans with different detachments to make it work. So as I've said before, if you take a battalion detachment, it's effectively free. It costs 3 CP, but you get that refunded if you have your warlord in that battalion. And anything you do beyond that will cost you CP. So really good if you're up against an opponent who loves to take knights, who loves to take 2 or 3 different factions, then they are going to have a huge CP disadvantage to you straight away, which I think is really good. Or they're going to have to limit what they take, which is also really good. I think the main hit to Tyranid players from that perspective is for those people that like to take Kraken and Kronos, or Behemoth and Kraken, or Behemoth and Kronos, or maybe you even like to take Leviathan, whatever you want to do, really. But there are people that like taking multiple detachments, and so this is going to cost you CP to be able to do that. Now, if that's still worth it to you, then pay the CP. I don't see any problem with that. For me personally, it kind of became a bit of a crutch towards the end, or has become a crutch towards the end of 8th for me. And it's something I kind of want to move away from because, I feel like I kind of straddle that line. I think probably a lot of us do, where I wouldn't call myself a narrative player. I never really play narrative games. But I'm not like a hyper competitive win at all costs competitive player either. I kind of sit in the middle, and I like my armies to be a little thematic, and I like them to make sense within the kind of the fluff or the narrative or the lore or whatever you want to call it. And so as a result, it kind of grates at me having to take a Kronos battalion and a Kraken battalion, for example. And not to mention, it can be difficult remembering which one's in which high fleet because I don't have them painted differently. I have them all painted as Leviathan. So, I'm constantly having to go, oh, I want to move him forward with my Swarm Lord, but I can't because he's in my other attachment. Things like that. And you always end up having to pay extra points for HQ choices that you don't really need or necessarily want to use. This feels to me like it's actually going a little bit back towards how it was in 5th or 6th edition and before, where you had a force organization chart and you could build your army within the confines of that, but with a little bit more flexibility, which is good because I used to really love making army lists back then because, knowing that I could only take 3 heavy support choices, it made me think carefully about what I might take. Having potentially unlimited choices, but having to take points taxes along with that, it all just got a bit much for me, and I feel like a little bit more focus would be really good for me. So I'm quite looking forward to that, and trying to take a bit of a CP advantage in only taking one battalion with me, unless I feel I absolutely have to take something else. So I think that's good. Also, so you generate 1 CP per turn that happens in the command phase. I think that's another good thing because I have a tendency to get a little bit excitable and maybe throw all of my CP at the first couple of rounds trying to do as much damage as possible, and then I'm often there later in the game really wishing I could get a command point reroll or that I could use that 1-point stratagem. So having those regenerate every turn with 1 CP is really good, it's really useful, and I think especially as a lot of our really good stratagems that came in Blood of Baal, most of them are 1 CP, that's going to be very beneficial to us as well. But I think onto kind of what is the main event, really, which is this new rule about monstrous creatures shooting in and out of combat. yesterday we had a big announcement about that, so I kind of want to talk about it in more detail. So we know what the rule is now. The rule is if you are a monstrous creature or tank, and you are within what they call engagement range, which is the new shorthand for being basically able to fight, so within 1 inch of an enemy unit, you can shoot any and all of your weapons, but they have to be at the unit that you are engaged with, or units with which you are engaged. So, I think I was saying before about how it could be good to maybe like fly a flyrant up and then access things that are a little further back from you at the back of the board. So you won't necessarily be able to do that. However, it makes it quite clear if you do manage to, let's say one of your guns manages to wipe out whichever unit you're engaged with, for the rest of the shooting phase, you can then shoot at other things. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, it's definitely going to be useful. It's definitely going to be useful to, if you have a shooty Carnifex that's in close combat, continue to shoot at what is engaged you and not just be completely useless. Likewise, Exocrines, things like that. It just stops us getting tied up too much, and I still think it is a very good idea to be more aggressive and to move forward and push up, you know, especially with Exocrines. I think that would be a really, really good way to go. The flip side is obviously that this works for tanks as well, so it works for your opponent. But again, I'm thinking about the fact that if I want to tie up a Baneblade or a Land Raider or whatever else it might be with some Hormagaunts, it's kind of put me in a stronger position for two reasons. First of all, yeah, okay, so my opponent can shoot at those Hormagaunts with those weapons, but he's still sooner or later going to have to use up one of his big, massive guns that does D6 or 2d6 damage on a Hormagaunt. And I'm really happy to make him do that to, you know, a unit like that. And now if they fall back, something else, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I'll definitely mention it now, where there's been a core rulebook stratagem that everyone gets revealed called Cut Them Down. It's 1 CP, and if your opponent falls back from you, you roll 1d6 for basically everyone that's in engagement range, everyone that's within 1 inch. And for every 6, they take a mortal wound. So it's a really nice thing that is going to make people think twice about falling back. They might think, oh, I'm better off just staying engaged and fighting out another round and thinning their ranks. Because if you've got 30 Hormagaunts and you try running away from them, then inevitably you are going to take, you know, a few mortal wounds of damage, and that might be enough to bracket someone, or you know, if they're on their last legs, it might be enough to wipe them out. You know, if you've got a full strength unit of 30 of them. So I think that stratagem is going to be very, very useful to us, and certainly something that's really wound me up in this edition is working my way across the board, doing everything I can to try and protect myself, and then finally getting there for somebody to fall back, for everyone else around to shoot. You know, falling back never had enough penalties to me to really be discouraged in any way, shape, or form. So that's that. The other thing about this is the new rule, Big Guns Never Tire, which will sound familiar if you've played the game for a while, is now that if you're a monstrous creature or a tank, you can still move and shoot heavy weapons without the penalty. However, if you are engaged and you are shooting at someone with whom you're engaged, you do have -1 to your shots of heavy weapons. Again, I do think this benefits us quite a bit, because a lot of our weapons are assault weapons. And I also think it benefits us, again, the idea of moving up a unit with a heavy weapon and keeping them going, and not suffering that penalty. I think I might do a separate video kind of focusing in on this a little bit more, but that's generally what we've had revealed so far. After this goes up, we will have had another sort of daily chat with Warhammer 40k, and more might come out. So I will post another video hopefully in the next few days covering that. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.